There are directors who make movies, and then there's Steven Spielberg, a man who makes memories. For over 5 decades, his films haven't just told stories. They've etched themselves into our lives, into our childhoods, our adolescence, our imagination. But behind the sweeping scores, the iconic frames, and the unforgettable lines, there's a quiet truth that rarely gets spotlighted. Spielberg doesn't just build worlds, he carefully casts the souls who live in them. Some directors choose actors, Spielberg discovers them. Not in the sense of fame or early career breaks, but in a deeper way. It's like he sees something invisible in them, something intangible yet absolutely essential, a resonance, not noise, a heartbeat, not performance. And once he finds it, he doesn't just hire it, he commits to it, protects it, returns to it. Because for Spielberg, the right actor isn't just a part of the story, they are the anchor of its emotion. They hold the camera steady when the world around them shakes. They aren't just performers, they're gravity. Across half a century of cinema, he's worked with hundreds, maybe thousands. But there's a sacred few, a constellation of 6 stars that stand apart, not just for who they are, but for what they became when Spielberg trained his lens on them. These are the actors he returned to, trusted implicitly, respected endlessly. The 6 who each in their own way completed his frame. So let's not waste the frame. Because these 6 aren't just Spielberg's favorites, they're the emotional architecture of his legacy. Let's begin with the one whose presence is so vital, so consistent, that Spielberg's filmography would feel fractured without him. Tom Hanks. He's not just an actor to Spielberg, he's a compass, a mirror, a twin flame. When Hanks enters the scene, it doesn't feel like casting, it feels like destiny. Their first collaboration, Saving Private Ryan, wasn't just a war film, it was a requiem. And at its center was Hanks, haunted but dignified, broken but composed. The performance wasn't loud. It didn't beg for attention. It whispered the entire weight of war with just a breath. Spielberg barely directed him. He didn't need to. A nod, a whisper. That was enough. With Hanks, the subtext is the script, and that theme continued across 5 more films. Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, The Post, each one revealing another layer of Hanks' quiet range, and each met with Spielberg's unwavering trust. This wasn't surface-level chemistry, it was soul-level collaboration. Hanks doesn't enter Spielberg's universe demanding light, he becomes the source of it. He's not a performer, he's a presence. The kind that doesn't steal scenes but stabilizes them. Directors sometimes chase chaos, spark, volatility. Spielberg finds oxygen in Hanks, something essential, invisible, yet vital for everything else to burn just right. And that's why this isn't just a collaborative streak, it's a cinematic ritual. Every time Hanks shows up on a Spielberg set, something ancient seems to settle. The nerves fade, the pace slows, the storytelling deepens, not because he overperforms, but because he never has to.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why actors love watching Hanks work just as much as directors do. You can't spot the art, you just feel it working on you. Spielberg once said that some actors light up a scene. Tom Hanks warms the entire reel. You don't direct that. You protect it. You frame everything else around it. But the dynamic with Hanks is just the beginning. If Hanks is the heartbeat, Daniel Day-Lewis is the echo that stretches through time. Their collaboration on Lincoln was brief, but it altered something fundamental in Spielberg. This wasn't just directing, it was something more sacred. Because when Lewis arrived on set, Lincoln arrived too. He didn't rehearse.
He didn't plan beats.
He didn't experiment on set.
He became.
And Spielberg, who usually commands every inch of a production, stepped back. He refused to call him Daniel.
He called him Mr.
President, not for drama, but because there was no line left between acting and being. Spielberg didn't direct him. He bore witness to him. And that reverence wasn't theatrical. It was earned.
Because
Lewis didn't perform the presidency. He invoked a forgotten weight. Every glance, every pause, every inhalation sounded like it had been waiting 150 years to be heard. And when the final frame was shot, Spielberg didn't ask for more takes. He didn't demand retouches. He simply said, "Daniel gave me the gift of time travel, And what do you do when someone bends time for you?
You remember it forever.
If Daniel Day-Lewis gave him time travel, then Harrison Ford gave him timelessness. There are actors, and then there are totems, symbols carved not just into cinema, but into culture itself. Indiana Jones isn't just a character.
He's a cinematic landmark.
But what makes Harrison Ford more than a rugged hat and whip is what Spielberg saw in him from the very beginning.
He saw someone who didn't need to try and be iconic. He just was.
They first locked creative eyes in Raiders of the Lost Ark, a movie destined to spawn generations of adventure lovers. And Ford didn't come in to perform like he belonged in an action movie. He came to remind Spielberg that action movies could still bleed, they could still laugh, they could still love.
He played Jones with bruises on his skin and weariness in his soul.
And Spielberg trusted it, because Ford trusted himself. This wasn't about oversized monologues or dramatic transformation. This was about presence,
The quiet force that walks onto a set and makes everything else settle into place.
Ford has that. Spielberg has called it confidence, not arrogance, just the kind of self-possession that makes a director's job easier, not harder. The kind that lets myth be born without having to draw attention to its birth. Ford doesn't turn scenes dramatic.
He turns them believable.
And that's the magic of their partnership. It wasn't built on awkward chemistry calls or repeated rewrites. It was built on instinct. When Spielberg needed certainty, Ford gave it to him in the simplest way possible. He showed up, did the work, and he did it without flinching. On the set of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, there was a moment when Ford insisted on doing his own stunts. Spielberg argued, concerned about safety, but Ford wouldn't flinch.
If I get hurt, he said, you'll know it was worth it.
That wasn't ego, that was conviction.
And Spielberg admired it.
Because unlike actors who need endless reassurance or spoon-fed direction, Ford knew the job before Spielberg even opened his mouth.
He's the actor Spielberg never had to mold.
Because he was already carved from the material Spielberg built films around. And even after Indiana Jones, even after the punches and the holy grails and the snakes, their bond endured, quietly, without ceremony. Spielberg said plainly, Harrison brings myth to life. You don't get more essential than that. And yet even icons need to evolve. They need challenge, precision, a scalpel, when muscle isn't enough. And that's where Leonardo DiCaprio enters the frame. When Spielberg cast Leo in Catch Me If You Can, the world still saw a heartthrob, a Titanic poster child. But Spielberg saw something few others did. Surgical control wrapped in charisma, charm that wasn't shallow, but weaponized, emotion that didn't spill, but pulsed under tension.
He called Leo's instincts clockwork.
Noting that he never missed a beat on set, never guessed his way through a line. He read scenes like maps, every choice charted with purpose. What made Catch Me If You Can so resonant wasn't its clever plot or retro flavor, it was the ache underneath Leo's eyes. An abandoned kid wearing confidence like armor. And Spielberg leaned in, not to extract more, but to stay out of the way.
He didn't try to push Leo toward greatness. He simply made space, and Leo met the silence with something honest. It wasn't flair, it wasn't manipulation, it was stillness that spoke. Spielberg adored it, not in a loud public praise kind of way, but in the way a master observes another master finding their rhythm. He called Leo's performance unshakably internal, and years later, he still referred to Leo as one of the few young actors he'd trust with a legacy piece. Yes, they only made one film together, but Spielberg keeps mentioning unfinished business, a reverence reserved for very few, because what DiCaprio gave him wasn't just a good role, it was proof that film still had surprises left, that even after decades behind the camera, Spielberg could still be startled by someone who understood the rhythm of cinema as music, and whose instrument was silence. 4 actors, 4 signatures in Spielberg's emotional vocabulary. One brings the oxygen, one brings the echo, one brings the myth, one brings the scalpel. But among the 6 there is also the unexpected, the one who didn't arrive like a storm or a scalpel, or a smooth stone, polished by decades. She arrived as legacy already written. Meryl Streep was more than a casting choice. She was an invitation Spielberg had extended to himself for over 40 years and only answered in the post.